Today I'm joined by Tom Bloxham. Tom is chairman and founder of Urban Splash, housing developer, and general good bloke. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Peter.
My first question is, it said that never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think it's really important as we emerge from COVID-19 that we build back better. And what do you see as the sort of key lessons we can learn from the impact of COVID-19 as far as the built environment's concerned?
And I mean, I think the COVID-19 will be a crisis, and I think we've not seen the worst of it yet. And clearly, let's all be aware, a lot of people are suffering in a real deep ways, and people clearly are dying, and that's a tragedy. Having said all of that, it will actually be my third crisis, I suppose, in property that I've been through. The first was in the late 80s, early 90s, which was about crisis demand. The second was a global financial crisis in the early 2007, 2008, and this is the third one. And everyone is difficult, and everyone's brought difficulties to us, but everyone's actually also brought opportunities. And I think this one will be no different. I mean, crisis, I think in Chinese, is threat and opportunity together. And it's very much a threat and opportunity. And going back to when I started in business in the late 80s, early 90s, those of us who can remember well, the crisis was a lack of demand. And certainly in Manchester and Liverpool, there were all these secondary office buildings, so-called, that the property industry said would never let. But for us, it was an opportunity because we were able to buy those very cheaply, often for less than the cost of the fundamental land, and find new uses for them. In the global financial crisis, again, another set of crises, that stage, it was a very different crisis, a crisis about funding. And actually the demand was still there. The property we had was renting fine, but you couldn't fund it. But that again brought new opportunities for us with new partnerships with William Pear's group, Property Group, and Place for People Housing Association. And so this new crisis will also bring opportunity, I'm sure. And it's probably too early to say exactly what that is. But it is changing the way we live, and it will change fundamentally the way we live and we operate it. I mean, one of the, I think, simple things that are sort of just took me today from some of these messages on Twitter was outdoor spaces and the way we build properties. And I feel so sorry for people you see on our Zoom and team meetings who are living in tiny flats with no outdoor space, having to work and bring up their kids and homeschool in the tiny flats. And actually, you know, maybe luck, maybe judgment, but so many of the Urban Splash properties have got outdoor gardens, have got communal green space, have got public green space. And I think that realization of how important it is, of how cities are built is really important. The other thing I think I'm certainly learning is walking around our cities is how much nicer they are with less cars and more people and more bikes. And when you think historically, which are the best cities that we love walking around, be it Venice or, you know, the back streets of East London or Mayfair or the Marais in Paris, they are the, you know, streets built over 100 years ago and not built for the car, but built for people. And actually some of the worst places we've got are the new streets we're building, which are dominating. You know, every time we build a new place, you have to answer the question, well, how is the refuse van going to reverse around the corner? And that dictates your building parameters, it dictates the distance between the buildings, and it creates for us a monotony of our housing estates in particular that has not been successful, has not been great. So I think seeing cities much more empty of cars has shown us what the potential could be in the future.
I think also the crisis is accelerating some of the changes that maybe have been taking place already, such as the take-up of digital communications like we're using at the moment. But for instance, I mean, you have been investing recently very heavily in modern methods of construction, prefabricated buildings. Do you think we're going to see a real change coming out of this crisis and moving the technology on a bit quicker?
I'm sure it will. I mean, I saw a great little tweet, you know, who's been most responsible for pushing technology in your company? Is it the CEO? Is it the chief technology officer? No, it's COVID-19. And, you know, it's one of those things. I certainly think that's the case. I mean, I think, you know, all of history shows us technology changes everything. and we have to embrace that. And actually, house building is one of the last industries to actually embrace technology. The way we build houses is almost feudal in nature. We rely on itinerant bricklayers and joiners moving from site to site, being paid on piecework. And they work very, very efficiently, and the house builders who run a very efficient model has worked for them for a long, long time. And so they're saying, why change? It ain't broke. And they have been very, very profitable. I think this COVID will accelerate the changes. I see the way industrialisation, the Industrial Revolution wasn't something that happened in Manchester 200 years ago. It's something that continues to happen. And, if you look in the kitchen, the sauces that our mothers made in the kitchen, we're now buying in the supermarket in jars and packets. Everything is being industrialised. Industrialisation is bringing higher quality products, is bringing better quality products, is bringing more cost-effective products. Look at televisions, for an example, or look at phones, but television is my favourite one. 100 years ago, a television was hugely expensive, a tiny little screen in black and white. Now, every time you buy a brand new television, it's twice the size of the last one you bought. It's half the price and it's far better. And yet our houses are getting more and more expensive and no better and arguably worse. And I think and I hope that actually technology, industrialisation, and factory production can help change that and can bring us more beautiful, better built, better designed homes for all of us.
And do you think COVID-19 will also impact on the way we put housing together? I mean, density is seen by some as being one of the things that I might say accelerates the virus. And will we see other changes? Like, do we design homes properly for the sort of home working that we're doing now and will probably do more of in the future?
I mean, I think one of the real issues, if you look at the dominant change in house design over the last 100 years, they've actually got smaller and smaller and smaller. And again, if you're going to work from home, then you want bigger space, you want a separate space. Again, you'd be on the Zoom calls. I know some colleagues, and I suddenly realised there's a pillow behind them in the bedroom, and you twig. The reason they're in the bedroom is the only room they've got where they can have a quiet conversation. So, I hope we will see better designed homes. We've been making homes very, very efficiently, very, very cheaply. What does that mean? It means we've had lower and lower ceilings, smaller and smaller windows, and they've been meaner and meaner. And I think it's time for some more generosity about the design of the homes and bigger spaces. So hopefully we will see that change. Ironically, we may also see smaller offices actually, because I think we've all found out that we're actually working relatively okay from our homes. And so perhaps there's less need for the travel and for the office and for everyone to travel from their home to the office every day for the meetings. And a lot of the stuff we can do equally as well from the home. So I think we will see some dramatic changes to the way we live and the built environment.
Now, you're obviously a great champion of Manchester, and I saw that Andy Burnham recently retweeted an article by Lord Heseltine saying that metro mayors should have a greater say in what measures are needed in their local economies after lockdown ends. So C19, do you think that will actually accelerate the shift which was promised by the government after the recent election to rebalance the UK?
I mean, I think we will, and I think it's sort of common sense. I mean, England is one of the most centrist countries in the world. And actually, who should be deciding what happens in Newcastle or Manchester and Liverpool? Is it the mandarins in Whitehall, or is it the city leaders in Newcastle and Manchester and Liverpool? And it seems to me fairly obvious that most things that are local and regional should be decided locally and regionally. I also think the country is weaker because London is so strong and the cities, the north-south divide, very crudely put, are weaker. And I love London, and London is a fantastic international city, and I really want it to be successful and to grow well. But actually, what brought people to London? It was the culture, it was the arts, it was the quality, it was the public parks, and it was the diversity of it, and so many interesting different people juxtaposed. And actually, the increase in values is not doing London any favours, I don't believe. It's pricing artists out, it's pricing so many people out, it's pricing key workers out. London actually wants to see homes become more affordable for the sake of London. but also the rest of the country wants to share in the wealth. And I think the whole country will be a lot better. I mean, the interesting thing about modular construction, it's one of the ways that can happen as well, because actually people building is a very good way of creating jobs. If the government want to invest in something, if they invest in something like cars, the problem is half of them get exported and built overseas. If you're building homes, by definition, you're building them in the country, and it's very labor intensive, and it creates a lot of jobs and all sorts of jobs of all sorts of skills, from very highly skilled architects, engineers, down to manual laborers and tradesmen and everything in between. The main problem being, of course, is the biggest housing need is in areas in London and the South East where unemployment is the lowest. The biggest need for jobs is in the north and other areas where actually housing need is the lowest. And by building them in the north very crudely and shipping them in the south, you do help bridge that gap and help bridge the economy and make the economy fairer for everybody and more successful for everybody.
So are we going to see any urban splash developments in London anytime soon?
Certainly hope so. I mean, last year we did a deal with a house by Urban Splash where we took on investors, Sekisui House, the biggest house builder in the world from Japan, and Homes England, part of the UK government. Part of that is to actually spread our house brand, spread the House by Urban Splash brand right around the country. So we've currently got sites, as we have a number of times, in Manchester, in Birmingham, an amazing site called Port Loop. We've won a site called Northstowe in Cambridge, which we've had planning for. We're going to break ground soon. We're working on development and site in Milton Keynes, and we're looking at a number of other sites around the southeast. We would very much like to work in London. The reality is, because most of our models are low and medium density, terraced housing and modern variants of the mansion house, which are actually ubiquitous to London, but is probably in the outer London boroughs. But we believe there is something we can bring. We believe our brand would resonate well with many Londoners, many people who are design conscious. And we think the work we've done in Manchester and elsewhere of making just the edges of the city centre that once were uncool, back being cool and exciting, sexy, and bringing those early adopters into new areas of the city and benefiting from the upvaluing that the regeneration brings. We believe there's a big role for us to play in London, and we're very much looking forward to finding some sites, finding some partners, and working in partnership with local authorities, housing associations, private landowners. So anyone listening to this has got any great sites for us in London, pick the phone up, send us an email.
Yeah, well, I guess your products do actually match the requirement of the Secretary of State for Housing, Robert Jenrick, who wants gentle density. So mansion houses, terraces, the sort of things that you're delivering maybe work well in London. So
yeah,
Tom, no, carry on now.
No, I mean, I think there's a place in London for very high density, and I love the towers in London, and I'm lucky enough to stay in the Barbican when I go there, top one of the towers, which is fantastic. And there's a place for high density, but there's also a place for medium density and low density. And all the design efforts really been put into the higher density. And I think there's much more of a place for great architects and great designers to be working on terrace housing and working on mansion house. And again, some of the greatest places historically have been those great Victorian Edwardian terraces, the great mansion houses, and much of London has been dictated by that in the past. And the streets that have stood the test of time and still look wonderful. And we want to be building 21st century versions of those, which again will last for hundreds of years. And I think there's a real richness to a terrace and a real richness to a mansion house. And there is a lack of richness to so many suburban estates built around cul-de-sacs and built around the car.
Very wise comments. Thank you very much. Tom Bloxham.
Been lovely speaking to you, Peter. Thank you very much.